How do we sound, babe?
Hello.
That was funny. All right, I'm just going to ride Jabish. Where's your water bottle gone?
Yeah.
Oh. Do you feel like that's like you as a water bottle?
What do you mean?
I'm feeling just stocky and because you're wearing a black shirt. Oh. Welcome back, everyone, to the Third Space Studio, and we are on the Chip Lunch podcast. If you hadn't realised what you're listening to or watching right now, my name is Joel. I am not joined by either Ethan or Braden, but I am joined by our special guest Jabish. How are you, mate?
I'm good.
It's very nice. I'm good, thank you. It's very nice to have you on.
Yeah, it's great.
Because we couldn't have Ethan or Braden along with us, we've dug back into the archives and brought out the COVID with leaves, thanks to Nikki. And an apt replacement for Ethan or Braden, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, sounds good.
He's helping me take over the podcast, this picture.
Two per person. Which two are Braden, which two are Ethan?
Well, I'd have to say they're all quite evenly sized, these three at the top, aren't they? So I would have to say the top three are Ethan and the bottom one is Braden. Not really, because the reason I chose that one down the bottom is because it's closest to the heart, and Braden has a really good heart.
He does.
That heart was made by Daniel Darvell. He 3D printed this heart for one of our sermon series on our digital gatherings. Shout out to Daniel. Thanks for that. Anyway, back to you, Jabish. How are you? We already asked that. Sorry, it's very exciting to have you on.
Yeah.
First question that we always ask everyone is, how do you like to have your hot chips?
With chicken salt.
Oh,
Have to be chicken salt.
okay.
Chicken salt, it's just salt enhanced. Superior salt.
Everyone says that. Yes. Everyone's like, why couldn't you improve things further? I'm like, well, because they've got the classics.
Is it MSG as well? Must be MSG, right?
I don't know. But yeah. Well, yeah, it's all MSG, guys, so you shouldn't eat it.
So that's probably why it gets you hooked.
Oh, because it's like it's MSG like makes you want to eat things more, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So maybe that's why.
Maybe.
I like it with a side of gravy.
Gravy.
As well. Gravy's nice.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Can you usually get gravy from?
If you go to the chip shop, yeah. So I haven't had chips in ages, but when we used to live in Caringbah, and on random occasions, Mum would be like, "Yeah, we can get chips." So I'd run down. It was like $6 for a box of chips you couldn't finish, and yeah, we'd get a side of gravy. My sister didn't like gravy, so we'd work our way from either end.
Oh, and see who would win.
As in, like, I could have the gravy side, and then she would have that side that didn't have gravy.
Oh, but you didn't just get a side of gravy in a container and then just throw it out?
For some reason, they would just pour it in. I think maybe they just assume you want gravy on.
And it just makes them soggy. Does that make them soggy?
Yeah, that's not too bad.
You like soggy chips?
That's okay.
I was talking to someone at work yesterday, I think, or the day before, and they were talking about like so many places like just undercooked chips. You know how it's just a little bit like this needs to be crispy.
Like chalky. Do you mean chalky inside, or do you mean it's not?
I think more the outside. The outside just needs to be crispy, and sometimes they're like, "Oh, it's good enough," and they just throw it out on the plate. And
I do like really crispy chips as well.
Yeah.
Whereas Amy likes more potato.
Amy, your wife, who has been on this podcast previously.
Yeah.
She likes what? Sorry.
She likes a high potato ratio.
Oh, that's right. She did say that on the chip
wedges
lunch.
are like great.
Yeah.
It's a lot of potato for crispy outside, whereas I like a lot of crunch.
Does that mean you like the French fry?
Ooh, I like more like, you know, when you have like offcuts of the steak cut chips. There's like they're broad and flat,
but also very crispy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like Macca's, not as much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe because they don't get crispy enough. I don't want to have to put like 5 chips in my mouth to feel like I'm eating chips.
See, that's an interesting, because I feel like it's a texture thing when you pull up, the 5 French fries. There's a different texture just having one chip.
Yeah.
Probably because there is more crispiness, supposedly, there's meant to be, and there's less potato content. But
Yeah,
cool. I feel like we're really delving into chips here. But you're a foodie, so you enjoy food.
I do.
But the quality of the oil and how often the oil is changed makes a massive difference to how nice chips are. I went to a place in Bundino, which is in the Southern Shire, and they had an amazing. They just like the food was really fresh, but the chips were just super fresh. Like you could tell they'd like either just changed the oil, or they were like, "Oh, we need to change the oil regularly." It was they were probably the best chips I've had in a long time. Actually,
What is good oil to fry chips in? I don't know.
Well, I think they're cooked in vegetable oil most of the time.
Yeah,
Which isn't. I don't think vegetable oil is great for you, but makes
high
things.
smoke point and cooked chips, I guess.
Yep, that's right. High smoke point. I don't know what a high smoke point is.
Like
What's that? Just having a drinks break with your gigantic.
it's like the temperature at which the oil will start smoking.
Yep.
And so I think if it starts smoking, it starts having like bad taste. Like that's when
It's
you get
too smoky.
Yeah, you don't want it to smoke. So you can heat it up a lot, cook the chips
In order to crisp it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Are you happy to move on from chips
Yeah,
now?
I'm totally.
So, the second question that we always ask is, and I'd like to pose this to you, Jabish, how did you become a Christian?
Cool. So I got to kind of like lay some groundwork before I get to that point.
Love it. I mean, we've delved so deep into chips. We may as well do this with your becoming a Christian story.
And I guess if there's points where you'd like clarification, either like stop me and I can like clarify as we go.
Yep.
But I think my story starts well before I was born. It actually starts when my dad was, I think, in high school I think in high school. My granddad went to him and said, you and your family are going to travel around India and settle in a foreign land, and you're going to be known as the Abrahams.
Wow.
Which is crazy now, which I think in retrospect I would guess I'd class as like a prophecy.
Yep.
But at that time, we didn't have the concept of surname didn't exist, or doesn't exist in India. It's more like by what you do and from the place that you are. Okay. So granddad was an accountant, so he was like the accountant from Palyadi, which is a place where he's from, and then dad was like the accountant's son. After granddad passed away, even though dad did engineering, dad's the accountant and I'm the accountant's son. Like that's just how it works.
Yeah, right.
And so dad kind of just like, cool, shrugged it off. I don't really have any interest in traveling or going anywhere. Like both my parents are from like quite a small town in India, like not from the city or anything. So dad's like, cool, finishes high school, goes to university, studies, and then he studied physics and then he studied engineering. Happened to study engineering at MIT, which is like it was a faculty of Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Yep. Which happened to have a branch in Chennai for a small period of time. It'll feed into the story, I promise. And so then they had like a campus interview where people come into the university and say, hey, would you like to work with us? And he got a job working in central India. In North India, in the middle, it's got a state called Maharashtra.
Yep. And
so dad's like, okay, cool. So starts working there, doesn't know Hindi, can't speak it, read it, write it, but somehow.
Is that because they speak it in, you said central India?
Yeah. Right? So Hindi is like the usually the language of North India, and then the southern states, which is only 4 states out of like 29 or something, speak different languages. So each state has its own language, and North India also share Hindi in common.
Okay.
And South Indians don't speak Hindi because we're like, I don't know, we're original Indians kind of thing. Because over time, as you had kind of Mughal influence and different people kind of, the Afghans kind of moved into India. And so you have like this layering of different groups of people. And so we have like a really, really old language called Tamil. And so generally people didn't adopt newer languages, because you can kind of live your entire life in Tamil Nadu and know Tamil, and it's all good.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Dad moves there, starts working, I believe it's a cement company, gets married. Mum also moves out there with him. So Dad learns to speak and comprehend Hindi, and Mum learns to read and write Hindi.
Okay, so they got all bases covered.
So they've together they make like a normal North Indian citizen, I guess. And so somehow they survived and they did well. I was born. They traveled. Mum traveled down. I was born down south, but I lived my early life up north.
Okay.
And massive blessing for me was that I was always brought up in a Christian home. Both my parents knew and loved Jesus, and at every kind of instance, I was kind of shown and taught that, which is a massive blessing. My parents even somehow like started a church in North India where they were. So they started a Bible study and slowly grew, which boggles my mind because they didn't know the language, but somehow started it. And I don't know how that church is doing now, actually, but it was cool. And eventually Dad moved back to Chennai, and which is where the main city of Tamil Nadu, which is where I kind of grew up until I was 10. And Dad's job, he worked at MRF, which is
the cricket bat maker?
Yes, which I was really proud of because Sachin Tendulkar,
yes,
obviously, greatest cricketer ever, given I'm Indian,
oh,
and Brian Lara both
yes.
had MRF cricket bats.
They did,
which was super cool. So I'd always get all these like free stickers for like my workbooks and stuff for school that were MRF, that like Sachin Tendulkar like blocking a shot or whatever, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And that job actually took him around everywhere in India, which is really crazy. And I didn't fully kind of comprehend like what Granddad had told Dad. I'm sure we'd heard of it, but it didn't really like make sense. But cool, Dad's traveling. That's fine. Around sometime when I was 6, must be just after 6, just after my sister was born, someone at Dad's work had applied to move overseas and had been denied. And so he kind of just wanted to get rid of all the applications and everything to do with that. And so he just like, kind of like, oh, I don't want to see this anymore, get these out of my sight kind of thing.
Yeah.
And just like, I don't know how, it somehow landed on Dad's desk. I don't know if he left it and Dad took it, or he gave it to Dad or put it on Dad's desk. I don't know. And so Dad kind of goes, oh, that's cool. Maybe we'll apply to go. I had pretty bad asthma growing up. And so India's obviously very polluted, which was often aggravating my asthma. And just like a general good opportunity to go elsewhere to have a better education for the kids and things like that. So a bunch of things fed into it. And so Dad applies. And the application process was crazy. So we're waiting for 4 years.
4 years.
For application to get processed. So we were coming as what's called, well, I don't know what the terms are these days, but it was called skilled immigrants back then. And essentially you land, and you land as you're kind of in like this void leading up to becoming a permanent resident, but you're kind of on the track to become a permanent resident as soon as you land in Australia. But there's 2 years of no support. And so fortunately, because Dad had gone to MIT to get his degree, Engineers Australia recognised his degree. So even though they were like, well, we can't recognise any of your work qualification, like your work experience, because we don't know if it's made up or not. We know that the qualification you got is legitimate. And Mum had studied teaching, so she had to sit the IELTS test, I think, which is what you do to like get accredited if you got your teaching degree overseas. So they had to do a lot of study, learn English. Well, they knew English, but not in the way that it's used here or is spoken and written. So they did all those tests. We waited. And so then I was 10. I have a sister as well. And so we both, all 4 of us, moved to Australia. And man, what a shock. Like had no idea about anything. All I knew was there were lots of computers, was my perception in Australia, and that there would be lots of white people.
Probably pretty accurate to a degree.
Well, given I landed in the Shire, very accurate.
Yeah, right.
And so we only knew one family in Australia, and so we moved in with them. They were in Caringbah. So we clicked in there. We came in May, which is like peak, leading into peak summer in India, and like, pretty cold here.
Yeah.
So we were kind of like freaking out. Our bodies are like, what is this? Like, we're wearing 2 jumpers, sitting in front of the heater, and it's still not like warm enough. Because I'm usually pretty okay with the cold, at least now. And so I recall like my sister and I would have to like jostle for the heater, because we were just like
Closest
taking turns to. Well, we were just like sitting in front. Like there was no.
Like almost catching fire.
Yeah. It's like threatening getting burnt to keep warm. But things lined up. We went to school. I went to Canberra North Public School, which is where my sister went as well. Dad got a job. I think we were able to rent a place within 2 weeks.
Wow, that's cool.
Which is really amazing.
Where were you staying before that though?
We were staying with the friends
the family
in Caringbah.
Yeah, sorry.
And then we rented a place. A restaurant owner is an Indian restaurant owner. It's still there on the Kingsway, Mumtaz Mahal, I think. He actually said that he would be guarantors on our rent, and said like if we can't pay the rent, that like my parents could work at the restaurant and
awesome, and
the money, which is really cool. Because when we came over, the exchange rate was around 50 rupees, would be $1. And in terms of cost of living, comparison would be like a cheeseburger, which let's say is $3, would feed a family for a week. Not kind of lavishly, but survivable. There'll be lots of people in India that would eat
on $3 a week, basically.
On $3, yeah. And so I think those were things that we didn't quite. Like we knew the exchange rate, but you don't often think about like what can you actually buy with
the actual cost of living.
Yeah. Whereas now we go, in America this is the exchange rate, but you can buy like a cheeseburger for $1 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so we didn't have that comprehension when we came over.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy. And we kind of came with our life savings, obviously. I'm not exactly sure how much money, maybe around a month we could like stay before having to like pull the plug and going back to India.
Wow, okay.
So we settled into school. We rented a place, and Dad got a job within a month of working here. So it was like a graduate job, but it was okay, and he worked at that, and that was kind of at that point things changed, and so there wasn't a sense of worry, and things were kind of. We were never for want. We always had food. Our house was furnished and everything like that, which is a massive blessing. And I think I took a lot of that for granted. I took a lot of stuff historically that God had done for granted. And but all the while, Mum and Dad, particularly Mum, would be instilling in us. She would make us memorize Bible verses every school holidays, which is, I don't know, you're like a 12-year-old kid, you don't want to be memorizing Bible verses before you can
more homework,
before you can play. Like, I studied for blah 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 time, all school term, but she kept at it, and we did it. And I think there was a moment 2 years after we were in Australia where it really struck home, when Dad came home and he said, "We've been in Australia for 2 years now. We're now considered permanent residents," because before this there was no kind of home allowance or job seeker allowance, like nothing. Australia kind of says like if you're coming as skilled immigrants, you need to come and survive in these 2 years,
right.
And then after that you have like a safety net. And so Dad kind of said like, hey, like if something happens and if I lose my job or whatever, the government will actually provide some support. And I think at that moment it really like struck me that, wow, like as I reflected on different phases of our lives, that God just like took care of us and provided for us. And the verse that stuck out to me was Psalm 34 verse 10, which is, though young lions may go hungry due to the lack of food, people who trust in the Lord lack nothing or no good thing. And I think it just kind of, as like things flashed kind of in my head as I reflected, it was just like this verse that was stood out. Yep. I've forgotten a lot of the verses that I memorized over that time, but like that verse just always stuck with me. That in all this craziness, in this shift of like complete change,
the risk as well.
That we were taken care of. And sorry to rewind, I've missed a part. So when we were finally coming over to come to Australia, you had to give a surname.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I think I know what's coming here.
Dad had actually named me when I was born. I was named Abraham. So my name was Abraham Jabish.
Okay.
Right. And that was to kind of appease my granddad, because my granddad would always tell Dad, like, you know, you're going to travel around, you're going to settle in a foreign land, you're going to be known as the Abrahams.
Was your granddad a Christian?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So very blessed. So both my grandparents on both sides are Christian as well.
Wow. Yeah,
so
cool.
A long history of Christianity, which was brought over by, I believe, there's kind of three possible sources. We're not entirely sure. One was, I believe, Spanish. When the Spanish came to trade, they kind of settled a lot on the western coast of India, and with them came missionaries. The British definitely brought missionaries, and so they set up a lot of schools. Christians came with them and set up a lot of schools and educated. And so there's like pockets of quite dense Christianity, particularly down south in India.
Yep.
And way back, they believe that the Apostle Thomas came to India.
Really?
And that's where he died. They believe that he was martyred in Chennai.
Wow.
And there are these 7, they call it 7.5 churches. There's one church is really, really small. That could be smaller than this like podcast space. And there's kind of these 7.5 churches that are kind of built in equal kind of spaces leading up to Chennai, where he was apparently killed.
Really?
So, yeah.
Wow.
Which is like, I don't know the legitimacy, but there's some kind of work has happened like around that time, because at least there's these really old like rock hewn structures, and there's like I've seen a baptism font that's like carved in like black granite that's like you know, old, and so something has happened. Maybe it's not actually the Apostle Thomas, but some person has brought Christianity. So there are pockets, particularly south, I guess, because it's more accessible by sea, that's come. So I've been very blessed. Like the two towns, like the town that my dad grew up in has like 3 or 4 churches in the one kind of area.
Well, that's pretty cool.
But then you'll drive like 5 kilometers and you'll get to another town, and it's like it'll be 4 temples, and then you'll drive a little bit more and then it'd be like all Muslim. And so you'll have pockets of people that all go to church together and like do life together, because there's only one market and there's one pharmacy, and so they work in that pocket. But yeah, so I was called Abraham Jabish.
Jabish. So just educate me on on the names. Sorry.
Yeah.
Jabish's last name?
Jabish was my middle name because we don't have a last name.
Because you don't have last names.
Yeah.
Okay.
The story behind my name is my parents were trying to have kids. They couldn't have kids for a while, and they were just praying that God would provide in His timing if it's His will. And yeah, I was born, and Jabi means like to pray.
Okay.
And so Jabish is where it kind of came out, and then it's spelt with an A, and so people say Jabish, but I kind of go with any kind of rearranging.
So should I be calling you Jabish instead of Jabish?
It's cool.
Jabish. I will do it from now on.
Yeah. And so Jabi means to pray. So that's the story in my middle name. And so Abraham was meant to be a first name. But when Dad's we're about to come over, and they're like, "What's your surname?" And Dad's like, "What's that?" They're like, "What's your family name? Like, what's your family going to be known as?" And so then it was like, whoa, okay. So Abraham became our last name. So I don't have a middle name anymore.
Okay.
So Jabish became my my first name, which is also interesting because I'd actually spent the first 10 years of my life being called Abraham, and then I come to Australia, and my name's Jabish now.
And everyone's saying it wrong too.
Yeah, people saying it wrong. They're like, "What kind of name is this?"
Yeah.
Like, I had a normal name.
Yeah, you just start calling yourself Abraham at school because you're like, yeah, this is no good.
Yeah, so I think that was so, that just hit me, and it's interesting that I was like 12, but that just like hit me real hard.
Well, that Psalm 34.
Yeah, and how he took, and I think it really kind of made me think realistically how God also provides eternally, and it's not actually about Him taking care of us when we came to Australia. Like those are, in terms of like on an eternal perspective, that's nothing, right? Like, and I think that really, if He can take care of us here in this adversity, how much greater is it that He cares for us eternally?
Yeah, right.
And so that really kind of, I think that's when I would say I became a Christian.
Because then you took the faith for yourself.
Yeah, rather than like living, I think I was living in the pattern set out by my parents. If I said something wrong or hurtful, my parents would teach me saying, hey, like, we should be speaking in a loving way. God wants us to speak lovingly. And so I had those structures, but it wasn't really like, oh, I want this is my belief and this is how I believe it's best to live.
Yeah, right.
That turn was it. Yeah.
What a fascinating story, though. Like that, your granddad's like, you're going to be known as the Abrahams.
Yeah, that was.
And now you are.
Profound. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's really crazy.
I'm just reflecting on it because it's like just such a different story from what we've heard before on the podcast. So, but what about? I mean, because you go back to India pretty frequently, don't you?
Yeah, I was trying to go back every kind of 2 to 3 years.
So I'm guessing you have still a lot of family over there.
Yeah.
And you spoke a little bit about how Christianity came into India. What's the feeling like that? I mean, if your grandparents on both sides and also your parents are Christians, what's the feeling around that in terms of Christianity in India, like from your perspective?
Yeah, I think as in like how it's received by the community.
Yeah.
Like that. I think in the places where they're from, it's quite like everyone's Christian in that town, and so it's quite normal. And things are mostly quite cordial with everyone out like in and around that.
Yeah.
People kind of generally from really down south, which is like we're from like almost the southern tip of India.
I'm looking at a map as we speak.
And like everyone's kind of, you generally just tend to move in like local areas. So you'll kind of have your suburb, you'll have your shire, and you'll kind of have a township, and you don't really need to move outside of that. And so there isn't like a great amount of division between Hindus and Christians and Muslims and etc. Down south, I think it's quite healthy and quite good. I think up north is where it tends to get more hostile.
Right.
Hindus tend to be a bit more fundamentalist up north. They've also had a lot more history where historically you invade from the north, and so when there's kind of people of the Islamic faith invading, they would invade up north and not down south, and so they've had that animosity that they face that animosity.
There's more hurt as well.
And I think the current government kind of uses that to kind of fuel that dissension, and that obviously helps them to get elected because they become the Hindu party rather than we want what's best for India. It's like, oh, we'll protect Hinduism.
Right.
And like they pass laws like it's illegal to convert someone, or it's illegal to proselytize, or like, share the gospel. Like all those things come in using the guise of like, hey, historically, like hundreds or thousands of years ago, this particular city was under siege and they were threatened to be killed unless they did, converted or whatever. And so that's constantly used as a thing and kind of this, kind of creating fear around stuff for political gain, really. So that's kind of really present up north, and that's where it's kind of can be quite rough. And also the percentage of Christians are lower up north. Mm-hmm. And so down south, I think we were very blessed, protected. Yeah. When I was going to school in the city, there's a bit of flack, but nothing to really worry about. Like some banter. Goes both ways, I guess. Like I've definitely been like, "Where's your God now?" And they're like, "God out in cricket or something." Really? Because you're a kid and you're like, "Oh, pray to God, I'll get a 6." And so like those things will happen, and we could be friends. Like I'd say they were friends, and so there wasn't really any animosity. And I've seen my dad have like really cool conversations with people on the train. So we'd catch a train from Chennai down south. I visit my grandparents, and it's you kind of like board in the afternoon, and you get off the next day in the afternoon. And so we had like sleeper cars. Yep. And so usually this car that we'd sit in would have 6 people, and so there's 4 of us and then 2 randoms. Yep. And so often like Dad would strike up conversations, and there might be a Hindu person or a Muslim person, and they'd have a good conversation and part on really good terms. So there are pockets of it happening that are where it's. There's pockets of bad stuff, I guess, and then overall people are good.
Because they're all just living together, really.
Yeah.
What how much how fluent are you in? Is it Hindu or should I
Tamil? So
it's Tamil.
I don't know Hindi at all.
Okay.
Tamil is I'm fluent. I have the vocabulary of like a 10-year-old. So
that's when you left, right?
Yeah. So I know those words and I hear stuff, and when I speak. It's funny to like my relatives because I'm like a grown man, but like the words that come out of my it sounds like I'm like a 10-year-old. It's like funny. If you, so the sentence structure and things like that are, I don't know how you describe it.
I was going to say, is it very different to English? Like because sometimes you look at Japanese, just as an example, is like it's based on syllables rather than letters, for want of a better way of describing it. Is Tamil similar to that?
Yeah, they have vowels. I think there's like 10 vowels sounds, and then they have consonants. I don't know how many there are, and then every sound will have one character, and there's no overlap. Like it can only be that one thing. So. Sometimes in English, like the letter A can be said, can make all types of noises depending on what's adjacent to, right?
Jabish or Jabish.
Yeah. And so, and it can like the same word that sounds the same can mean heaps of different things, right?
Yeah.
Like there.
Yeah.
What do I mean?
Yep.
And so that doesn't happen. So in that way, it's more straightforward because you make this noise. It like this character denotes this noise. This is the only noise that it denotes, and it means this thing. And you still form words, so it's not like Japanese where characters are words, but there's like 266 characters.
Wow.
And so because it makes sense when you see it graphically, because you're like, this consonant linked with this vowel always has like this squiggle on it.
Okay.
And this thing will mean that it's like got like it looks like a telephone, like character. But yeah, I've lost my ability to read and write. I can maybe make out some of the vowels or like guess, like I probably like guess like 4 or 5 characters and take a punt at what a word would say. So I don't really read it all, but we always spoke. So when we came to Australia, we were like, okay, we're going to speak in English to get us to learn English. And then I remember, I don't know when it was, but there was a switch where my parents were like, okay, we're now going to start talking in Tamil because we have figured out English now and we can speak with English with other people and develop our English skills, but we need to preserve Tamil. So we'd always speak in Tamil at home. That was like not forced or anything. We're just like, oh yeah, that's cool. That sounds like a good idea.
No, but it connects you to where you're originally from, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, if you came over when you were 10, But did you become a Christian around 12? Was that right?
Yeah.
So that's going into high school, right?
Mm.
How was that for you being, first of all, someone that's come from another country? You've had to learn the language, go to school basically within 2 weeks of getting there, then go to a different school in terms of high school, and you're also becoming Christian around that time.
Yeah.
What's going on for you at the time? How did you feel?
Yeah. Early high school was, I reckon, pretty tough.
By the way, we went to the same high school, didn't we?
It's true.
Yeah.
We did.
How many years behind me were you?
I think it was 3 years. I finished in 2007.
Yeah, 3 years. Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry, keep going.
Yeah.
But that's kind of cool that we were at the same high school. Yeah.
High school was tough. I think I was picked on a fair bit. I mean, I guess like that's kids, right? Like they find anything and everything to.
It's different to them.
To
avoid having it themselves.
Yeah, correct. So I think it made me like, I think I was quite open up until then.
As a Christian?
Yeah. I think I would still say, like, I was always telling my friends I was a Christian, and all my friends in India knew I was a Christian. I was quite open about it.
Yeah.
In my year of like there's 600 people in my year in India. And like, I think there was like, in my class of 60, there was like 2 Christians, and we were quite well known as Christians, and that was fine. And I think coming to high school was like, whoa, I need to be, I've found myself having to be on guard and being like, not like giving away something means that it could be used to
against you,
like take a shot at you. And so I think I closed up, like became more reserved overall. And I think that did have a flow-on impact into how public my faith was as well. I think my friends would know, but I wasn't like openly a Christian. Like people at school in year 7 wouldn't have known like, oh, that guy is a Christian. But like my friends knew I was a Christian, and I kind of kept it to that. And so once I could trust them, then they would like know who I was and know my interests, as well as this other big thing in my life, which is my faith.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how it went. Like I still went along to scripture. Like obviously, like there's no there were still public things that were there to point to me that I was a Christian. Because I mean, I was never going to do this, but there's no way I'm getting opted out for scripture. Like my parents aren't going to opt me out. Yeah. And I didn't ask ever.
Well, that was the thing. We should explain it. Guy Me High was there was an optional scripture lesson in the Tuesday afternoons. Is that what it was for you? Or was Tuesday afternoons for me to begin with? Yeah.
So for me in year 7 and 8, we had scripture. So Fee came and taught us scripture, which is amazing.
Fee from our church, yeah.
Fee was great. And so I was in those classes. And then after that, I think the only thing you had was Tuesday, which is optional.
Tuesday afternoons, yeah.
Yeah. Which is an interesting play by the school. But, we won't go into that, I guess. Yeah, so like I still went to that. And so that was still a like visual sign that I was going, and that I was sitting in class, and I would be sitting at the front, and I'm not, heckling or, throwing chairs or whatever, like, whatever the other kids were doing. But there wasn't really like much more than that kind of structural stuff. Like I don't think it was a long time before I came to Chip Lunch, which was a thing that we had at during lunchtime sometimes.
Friday afternoons,
Friday afternoons, yeah. Because I think the safer thing was just to play handball with my friends.
Because you wouldn't stand out publicly.
Yeah, not make it a point of difference to go and then to have answer question like, oh, where were you at lunch? Like, we had a sick game. Like,
I was at the Christian group. Yeah. You don't really want to say that originally,
yeah.
You going to church at that time?
Yes, in year 7 and 8 I was. Coming up to year 9, where where scripture became optional.
Yeah.
The allure of, do I go to scripture, or do I like go hang out with friends, or do something else, or go play games or whatever, is quite strong. And you're not really the most You know, I wasn't the most recent person when I was that age. So I was like, oh yeah, I'll play games with my friends.
Yep.
And so that kind of dropped off. I think I also, I don't know if it was like pride or complacency. I kind of felt like I wasn't really getting much out of church. Like I'd be like, I kind of know all this stuff. I go to Bible study.
You memorize the Bible verses.
I go to these things. I know these stories. I know what happens with Gideon. I know what happened with David. Like I know, yes, Jesus did this. He did these miracles, and then he went and got crucified. Like, what really is there more for me to? Which is like sounds so like conceited looking back, but I kind of went like, look, everything we're covering is like known. Like we're in the known realm. So like, I don't really need to go to scripture, and I don't need to go to church. And so I think my attendance kind of, that's when it dipped. I was in and out. I would still go to, we had some Bible studies. I went to church at St. Phil's in Caringbah. So I'd go to Bible studies maybe in the mornings, on Sunday mornings when my parents went to church. And so there was some connection still, but I think it really plateaued there or dropped there. And it wasn't until year 11 when, again, it just felt like God was just like slapping me to wake me up.
Wake up.
Where I happened to go, we had a youth service at St. Phil's at 5:00 on Sundays. And that was like I think they were preaching on like the purpose of church. And, it's not actually just about what you can get. It's about like community and
how you can serve, yeah. And
I think leading up in that time, I kind of like figuring out like, hey, I know everything, or not everything, but like I know what I need to know. And then I was, like I loved science, and I love like the known, like, stuff that's concrete. And so this idea of like, oh, does science disprove Christianity? Like I'm toying with all these things, and then I like hear this talk, and I'm like, oh, okay. Church isn't about just receiving knowledge, right? It's not just like a university degree where you go and like, okay, I'm getting my weekly download of knowledge, and oh, okay, I'm not learning anything anymore, so I guess there's no return on this time that I'm getting. It's actually investing in people and forming like a community and being a family, really. And you don't stop hanging out with family because you know everything that they talk about, right? And so that was like, oh, it kind of hit me to my core of what the reason I gave myself to excuse myself from scripture and youth group and all these things.
Because I'm not getting anything out of myself.
Because I was like, oh, that reason is incorrect. And then, so that was on Sunday. Then on Tuesday, a friend of mine said that we should go to scripture on Tuesday. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah, see you there.
Yeah, got you. Yeah. But he did something really clever. It was English, it was the fifth period. And he was on the other side. So I don't know what the name of the building is now, but like, there were some English rooms with the office, and there were some English rooms up at like 50 something, right?
Yep.
Near the English staff room.
Yep.
He somehow got to my English classroom over here near the office before I got out of class and left. I don't know how he did it.
That's very fast.
Yeah. I don't know if he got an early mark. I don't know what he did.
Because it's a fair distance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe he said, can I go to the toilet? And the teacher's like, go to the toilet and then go home.
Possibly. And so he was there at the door, so I couldn't slip out. So he was like, you said we're going to go to scripture, so we're going to go to scripture.
Wow. And
so I was like, I guess I'm trapped. I did give my word. So I went along. Jai and Stu were there, we were ministers here. And I was in Matt Robin's Bible study. And we were grouped up in seniors. And I don't remember what the passage was, but it was talking about like maybe something to do with like don't be aggressive or angry or like that kind of stuff. And one of my friends who's also at the Bible study like coughed and was like, Jabish. Like when you like read a passage.
Well, because you're angry.
Well, yeah, but like I guess like that's some of the things that you ought not to have, like Christians ought not to do, that was being outlined by Paul, I think. He felt like, or at least as a joke, resembled the way I acted.
I thought you were saying you actually were angry.
I think I was.
Okay.
I think that was like, so there were all these moments of like reflecting on, how on my behavior. And so you had this talk on Sunday and it hits me on like my reason for like kind of stopping going to church. And then he says this, and then I start thinking about like, I was a bit more angry person. I was like swearing a lot, and, I guess you're playing handball and that's just like classic recipe for swearing.
Yeah.
I'm getting angry.
Do you think it's also to do with just in terms of your history as well, and like people picking on you and stuff, and like,
yeah, and I think you need to,
I didn't choose this and I've come from pretty difficult circumstances.
Yeah. And so, and like being the norm, like being a part of like the way other people, the way that other people act. And so I think like he apologized, and Matt was like, we shouldn't be, this isn't how we want to like have our group. And that was fine, but I think it still stuck with me because I think it had a bite because it was true.
There was some truth to it.
Because it wasn't true, I would have just laughed it up and like, oh, that's obviously absurd, whatever, let's move on.
Yeah.
So it was that. Then like 2 days later again, I don't know how I got into this, but I was having a conversation with someone at Gaimir on the train station. I think this person was like 2 years younger than me. And somehow he ended up asking me about the gospel. I ended up sharing the gospel with him. And I was like, this is awesome, right? Because in my head, I'm still thinking like I'm a Christian. I'm sharing the gospel and like your life will change, blah, blah, blah. And he turns to me and goes, but your life doesn't look like this.
Wow.
And he didn't mean it in an aggressive way. He was just like, his logical end was like, oh, but I don't observe this in you.
Yeah, you're telling me this, but then...
Because you're like swearing on the playground, you're, obviously like your response to, often your response to being the recipient aggression is to like, oh, if I'm aggressive,
respond.
Then I'm fine, because then you won't, like, I'm protected now because I put up a good offense. It's great defense.
Yep.
And so then I was like, oh, wow. Like I've had like these three kind of like 1, 2, left hook punch kind of things where I've gone, okay, like I've had this resolve that I don't need it, which is wrong. And then I've had these two reminders that like I haven't even been doing it well anyway. So what's the good of, what's the point of having this knowledge if, faith without works is dead?
Mm.
And I think that weekend was like a massive shift, reflecting on that to go, okay, well, I need to be in this community. I remember coming across this analogy. I don't know who shared it, but I think I heard it like a men's convention or something. There was like a man, and I heard this analogy as well pretty recently after that, but I don't know. I don't think it was within the week. There's a man who was like, oh, I don't need to go to church. I'm fine. And the story goes, the minister comes over and they're both sitting near the fireplace. The fire's going and the minister gets the tongs or whatever and picks out a red hot coal from the fireplace and places it in front. Mm. And the coal's red hot. And they sit and they're just watching. No words are said. The coal slowly goes greyish, whitish, and then it's black.
Yep.
Picks up the coal, puts it back in the fire. They wait. It's red again.
Heats back up.
It's back up. And so the minister just says, see you on Sunday. and leaves. And that's an awesome mic drop moment. I don't know if that's a true story or if that's how it played out. But I think that's clear. When you're with the people, with the community that are choosing to live this particular way and go this particular way, it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to like not slip into the ways of the world. And I would never have comprehended that would happen because I had this upbringing that was never geared towards that.
Yeah.
Because I didn't really know any different this whole time. And so in my head, I was like, look, I'll just keep living the way I have been living, holding to the truths that I already know, and I'll be fine. And so I think after that, I was like, okay, I need to be serious about being a Christian, because being a Christian is more than just saying you're a Christian. Yeah. Because all those 2 years, I would tell people I was a Christian, just like I shared the gospel with this guy, saying I was a Christian, but I would say I wasn't living like one. And I think that's where the turning point of, okay, when I was 12, I think I understood for real on a head knowledge and heart knowledge. I think I understood in my heart what Jesus had done for me. But then I think in year 11 was probably when I was like, okay, I need to like live like that's true in my life.
Yeah. You said that you were like reasonably reserved when you first went to high school, and then perhaps like there's a bit more anger creeping in. Is that the way that you responded to people and the way that were you less reserved and also less angry after that point in year 11?
Oh yeah, I was definitely less angry. I think I'm more open now, but it's hard to say. Like I am a reserved person. I take a bit to warm up, but I don't think that's it's definitely not like from anger or feeling like worried or anything.
Also, like our personality is shaped by obviously what we inherit from our parents, but also our experiences in life. And for you, coming from a place that you're really comfortable and a place that's really uncomfortable, you're going to be more reserved because you're like, I'm still figuring it out. So, and it's this formative time, right? When you're in high school, you do form a lot of habits, good or bad. Well, I think when you're going through high school and how you cope with things and stuff like that. But then again, like you're saying, the transformative effect that God can have on you is like just changes your heart, and you can, like you said, immediately you became less angry. Yeah. That's pretty impressive. Yeah. Yeah. That's the power that God has. So, that week was like, I'm like, what is going on? And I even think, I think one time I was swimming in squad, and I was an absolute nerd. Oh, I mean, I was a classic Indian, so I did 4 year maths. And so I had period 0. Yeah. At Gymea 4 unit was period 0, wasn't it? And so we had roll call at 9 or something, but the way they fit in these extra classes was before roll call and before kind of reading and hangout time, you'd have a class. Yeah, I did 3 unit English like that. Yeah. And so, the first class, it started like 7:45 or something like that. Yeah, I think that's right. And so after swimming, I wouldn't have time to catch the train, so Dad would drive me, and often we'd listen to FM 103.2. And I think even that's the talk... That's a Christian radio station in Sydney, right? Yeah. And even that talk, I don't know, there was some like brief 5-minute thing. Even that was kind of, in some way, I remember it pricking my conscience about this whole like venturing away from church. It's so crazy how being like in the community, having all in the same week. That's wild. Yeah. So it was like God's like, I've had enough of you. Yeah. I've had enough of your insolence. It's time to stop. And everything changes. Like, and then you realize, man, I don't know anything. Like, I know some stories. I could tell you what's in a children's Bible, but there's so much depth to understand. And I mean, like, you can read a passage 3 or 4 times in the space of a year and get something different out of it. That God's speaking to you at that time. So I fully understand that. So once you finish high school, what's the plan? What do you decide to do? Is it the classic Indian plan?
Yeah. So doctor or engineer.
Yeah.
Right. In that order, doctor, engineer, scientist. There's a tier list, I guess. I peaked. I think I didn't. I don't think I ever learned to study. Right. It was all
memory.
Yeah. Just rote learning.
That was pretty similar to me, actually.
Which worked till year 10. So I peaked in year 10.
That's my story as well.
And
At year 10, and then I'm like, I can talk to girls and other people, and now I don't want, and then I can't rely on my memory either, so I'm not going as well at school.
So, 11, 12 comes, computer games. It wasn't girls for me, it was computer games. Derailed. Like, I think I didn't know that I had lost that, because up until then, like, I would do homework quickly.
Yeah.
I wouldn't study, and I'd still smash the test. And so then 11, 12 caught me as a surprise because I go, oh,
the same methods
I read
weren't
this
working.
twice, but now I still don't I don't know how to comprehend and apply this subject.
Yeah.
But I think I didn't really, isn't this easy to say? Oh, I didn't really want to become a doctor anyway. I believe my heart was more set towards engineering. My dad had done engineering. Funny thing is, I think Granddad wanted Dad to do accounting as well, or go in finance way. But anyway, I was like, no, I'll do engineering. So enrolled. I got early entry into Wollongong Uni, which is a university here, to do electrical engineering. So that was a start. I ended up switching from engineering to commerce. So ended up with Bachelor of Commerce in finance. So that was windy road, but yeah.
What was it like being a Christian at uni? Because some people say they enjoy being a Christian in uni that we've had on the podcast, but some other people say, I just kind of turned up and did my classes and left. That's what it was for me at uni, for example.
Yeah, I think because all my classes were kind of more in. So we had a kind of a tight cohort when I was doing engineering initially, and so there was a bunch of Christians there and people that went to the Christian group. So I was quite involved in the Christian group in first year of uni, and that was kind of cool. I didn't really encounter any resistance. Like, you could be whoever you needed to or wanted to, or whoever you were. And so I hung out with my friends, made friends with the people that I got along with, and I don't really get along with that person. That's okay. I see you every second class, and that's fine. I went to MYC, and that was really cool.
What's MIC?
MYC stands for Media Conference, which is a bunch of universities would go away in the middle of the year and have a camp for a week. And we looked at Hebrews.
Oh, sorry, Christian ministries.
Yeah, the Christian group would go on camp.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's when I first encountered really, really deep study of the Bible.
Okay.
I'd have Bible study and things like that, but you'd have all these different people that think so differently, being like, what is this? Who is this?
What's God teaching in it?
Yeah. Things like in Hebrews, there's a person called Melchizedek that's mentioned, and he appears in the Old Testament really early on.
Yeah.
And he's this heaps mysterious figure. He's like a king and a priest, and it says that Jesus is in his line because Jesus is also king and priest, and exploring what that means and things like that. I had never really thought on that level of seeing the connections and how prophecies and symbols that exist beforehand are.
It's all part of God's plan too.
Yeah, and all those things are like, oh, this is really cool. This is a level that I hadn't kind of thought about the Bible on. It's not just a compilation of. It's not just a compilation of stories. It has meaning to me and has implications in the real world. Yeah. But then there's also all these interconnections of God, foreshadowing things and prophesying things. And I love that stuff because, again, it's my story where Granddad has had these words that ring true for so long.
Yeah, well, that's
so distant. So
what a great connection.
For me, stuff like Moses going into the Red Sea and going into the desert, and wandering there. On the flip side, Jesus getting baptized and going into the desert for 40 days. Like I love those parallels because I go, oh, okay. To me, that's like, oh, God has a plan.
Yeah.
Like there's no things like that don't happen. Like they're all that time period.
And also fits with your experience too, right?
Yeah.
Like coming from India.
Yeah. So, so that was really cool at uni. But then after that, I think after the first year, and me slowly transferring towards commerce, my cohort changed, and so it became more kind of going into uni, doing my classes and leaving. I also became more involved at my local church, and so investing. It kind of got to the point where I could either invest in uni ministry, heaps, do all their evening activities and their Bible studies and things like that, or I can invest it.
Crypto.
Invest in crypto.
Yeah,
I mean, if I invest in crypto then.
Sorry, that's just discussions we've had before.
Yeah. And so that was, so I made the choice to invest in my local church. Yeah. Which is also great work.
So was that was youth leadership?
Yeah, so I did a little bit of everything at St. Phil's. Most of the stuff was youth leadership, and I did some kids ministry as well. So Fridays were just... we had Kids Plus, which was years 4, 5, 6, or 3, 4, 5, and then youth afterward. Youth was kind of like year 6 and year 6 to year 11. Yep.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. And I did youth leadership for 6 years back at Guyme Anglican Church when Soul Revival was the youth community there, and it's interesting that I look back on that now and go, oh my gosh, I learnt a lot being a youth leader, because like I learned how to talk to people of different ages, but also like just to be able to share the gospel in a really relational way. Is that the similar experience that you had in terms of doing ministry there? Yeah,
I think just like even teaching, particularly given my experience, I had some kids that grew up in Christian homes and some kids that weren't. And it was cool just to explore the gospel, encounter like kids that thought the way I did, that they knew all the stories, and to push them to be like, hey, there are things that more to explore. Because, often in youth we kind of do one of the gospels every year because we actually, there are people that haven't heard the gospel coming along. And so pushing those kids to engage with more and seeing that there's more depth to the gospel than just a story. And then on the flip side, helping them figure out what it looks like to live, to live as a Christian, and how does this apply into school. And at the same time, you're like, I would find myself reflecting on my own life and how, how the similarities. I think in some ways things haven't changed at least then hadn't changed for the kids that are facing similar stuff. And you're just figuring out how you grow because you're helping them face situations that are slightly different to yours.
Yeah, and you're also helping them grow as well. And you're right, it does make you grow because, you're learning. It's that sanctification process again that we've talked about. Is it is the coal. You're helping them keep their coal hot, keep it hot, nice and hot, but by doing that, it helps you to keep your coals hot, if that makes sense. Yeah. While you take a swig from the keg of glory. After so you're at university, switched to do a different degree.
Yep.
Still leading youth at the same time. Once you come into the workforce, what's changing for you? Because you've been through quite a journey and coming up to this point. Did you feel was there a point where you actually obviously you got Australian citizenship the 2 years afterwards? Was there a point where you felt like, I actually am, and tell me if I'm overstepping the mark here, but you actually felt like you're Australian?
I think that would be...
And I'm not saying you have to actually feel that either, right?
Yeah. I think I do. I think it was 5 years after that.
Okay.
So 7 years after being in Australia. So probably, just as I finished high school is probably when I became an Australian citizen. It's probably a few more years before
Primary school or high school?
high school.
Okay.
So I came in when I was in year 5, then went through high school, and then, so start of high school we became permanent residents, and then 5 years after, ish.
You get citizenship. Sorry, I mixed up those terms. Yep.
And so I think it was probably a few years after that. I think as a migrant, you're like trying to figure out who you are, and
there's an identity thing, right?
There's a whole like layer of like, I think this is a bit dumb, but I did make a joke about it. This like, did the Indian thing, but like this idea of like degree of Indians. And so I grew up in the Shire, and so there weren't many Indian people in the Shire. So pretty much all my friends were Australian, white Australian, I guess. And then I had a couple of Chinese friends. And so growing up, my life influences are very different to my family friends who were living in Blackdown, say. And so they all, actually half of their friend circle are Indian, and they would watch like Indian movies and, love the cricket and like watch the cricket more than I do. Yeah. And so there was just like, you're so like, you're already Aussie. You're so Aussie. And so it's this weird thing because I don't feel Aussie because I'm not heaps accepted by Australians as an Australian because I stand out here in a bunch of ways. But then I don't feel like I'm Indian. And then when I go to India, they're like, whoa, you like changed so much.
Look at this Aussie.
Yeah. So, you're so Australian. You're speaking in Tamil in like an Australian accent and
right.
all this stuff, right? Yeah. And so I think it took a while for me to figure out like who I am. Like I'm Australian, and I do believe I'm Indian. Like, and kind of settling that portion of my identity kind of took I think a couple of years.
Do you think Jesus shaped that?
I think it definitely did. I don't think it was a conscious thing, but I think it was a subconscious thing because
especially that point in year 11 you were talking about.
Yeah, because who I was, like I guess the citizenship that I'm most concerned about is like being a citizen of heaven, right? Like that's who I am. It just so happens that I was born in this particular land and grew up and came in and live in this other land where I have these pieces of paper say that I'm from there, and that I'm recognized by that country, but it kind of it pushes to the side because that's not really my identity. It's I guess an identifying characteristic or something. Yeah, you could say, but because of that, it was a lot easier to kind of do away with that. So when someone says like, "Oh, are you really Indian? You don't watch Indian movies?" Like, well, I don't watch them because I don't care. Like, I shouldn't have to watch Indian movies to be Indian or whatever. And so it really means that you don't need to care about it as much because it's not as important.
But it's because you're not identifying as an Indian in Australia or an Australian Indian or Indian Australian or whatever. Yeah. It's like I'm a Christian. Yeah. And then everything else is after that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a Christian who was born in India, lived there 10 years, moved to Australia.
I love that.
But I'm a Christian.
I like it how you said you're a Christian, that you were born in India. Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember through all the guests, I mean, this is episode 27 of the Chip Lunch, and I'm trying to remember if we've had a couple on before, because we already had Amy on, your wife, but I don't know if we've had the other half of a couple on. I'm trying to remember if we have. I'm not sure if we have. But anyway, the reason I ask is it'd be interesting to hear your side of the story about how you met Amy and how you guys got together and obviously got married. Yeah.
So I was at St. Phil's Anglican. I was running the youth ministry there. Amy, I think, came on. It was quite late notice actually, but she came on as a student minister, which is cool. And so started helping out a youth ministry, and we kind of just hung out. We're around each other for about. She did youth ministry there student ministry there for 2 years, And so we slowly were getting to know each other. And I think near the end of the first year was kind of when we started dating. I think we started dating in December. Yeah.
You're pretty good with dates, man. Because I remember you're saying with that story in year 11, you're like, this was on a Friday, and then the next Tuesday.
Yeah, I know the proximity of one event to another.
Yeah.
But yeah. So as we got to know each other, we just kind of clicked. Like I think initially, I remember like she doesn't like coffee. Didn't eat heaps of meat, so I was like, "Ooh, okay."
Is this really where I want to go?
Yeah. No, but I think just serving together, you get to know each other, and hanging out, and so we started dating in December, and I think our first date was, I don't know if she said what our first date was.
I can't remember. You have to remind me.
So we went from Sutherland. We played putt-putt at Putt Planet.
This is a good date already.
Yeah.
Putt-putt, yep.
At Slovenia. She beat me. So
Ooh.
it's a bit rough. The
From where you were putting, or just it was rough to lose?
It was rough to lose. So I got these. She got these jelly beans as a prize from the lady that owns Putt Planet, and she gave me a banana, and she wrote "lose a banana" in permanent marker.
What? And then you meant to eat it?
And so she's like, "Here you go." It's like the wooden spoon. So I was like, "Oh man, rub salt in the wounds." But
that's a cool sense of humor.
Yeah. But then we switched anyway because, the lady that was running it gave the prizes to us.
Oh.
And so then we switched because Amy was like, "I'll happily eat the banana and I'd have the lollies." So we ended up switching prizes anyway. Then I bought some spray paint, and then we got some burgers, and then I think we had youth that
Why did you buy spray paint?
I think I was helping out at church painting something. Yeah. So
like,
I think
why did you do
I
that?
remember I was like, so we can do something fun, and then I need to do some errands, and then we can do something fun, and then I need to do some errands.
Is this how life is like for you?
And then we can go to youth. So it was kind of like Putt Planet, paint, burgers, and then I think I had to buy something at like Spotlight or something again for church, and then we went to youth. So,
yeah, right.
Yeah. So that was our first date, and I got married a year later.
Yeah.
In December.
Lovely.
So, yeah.
Well, congrats.
Thank you.
That's really cool. I think it's probably a good time to wrap up, but I feel like just before we do that, just feel super encouraged the way that you have allowed Jesus to be, like, continue to allow Jesus into your life rather than you had that period where you felt like, you knew everything, and then he just, like, you still had to listen to him. You still had to listen to God when he was saying, "Hey, you're not paying attention to me. You need to pick this up."
Yeah.
But also just in terms of your perseverance, also like your story about your grandparents and your parents and stuff like that. And I'm really stoked that I know you to know those kind of stories, and I think it's really cool. And I've really enjoyed listening to it. Like you said before we started recording, like, "Oh, do you want the short version or the long version?" Like, long version. Give us the long version.
Yeah, the director's cut.
It's the director's cut, a special edition. But yeah, it's been really special edition having you on, man. So
yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Anything else that you'd like to finish the episode with before we wrap up the chips?
Oof. I don't know. I guess I think I can only like share the learnings from my life.
I've got a question.
Oh yeah.
This is a question that we started asking. At any point in your life, looking back so far, where's the point you'd like to go back and say, "Hey, Jabish, you need to do this differently"? And you have kind of talked about it a little bit, but I'd love if you've got like if you can think of a particular time where you think, "Where's older Jabish telling me what to do here?"
Yeah, I think the point would be kind of year 9. I remember kind of the clear point, I think there were crossroads where I was doing scouts at the time.
Okay.
And scouts meant that I'd be going on camps and things like that. And that would take me away from church and on weekends when I camp and when I go to the program. I think that Bible study was on Tuesday or something, and the scout group met on Tuesday. And I think I would question that decision. I think I'd go do something different there, and stay connected to, like the youth group would have a Bible study outside of, like on a weekday, and then that we'd like hang out and on Sunday and things like that. And so I think that's where I would change it. I would say either find a different scout group or, I don't know, scouts. It's okay, like giving it a miss, I guess.
Yeah.
I think that's what I would change, because I think that became a like a tangible thing that I did that was like a blocker. So it was there like to take me away when
excuse.
I was or whether actively or passively.
Yep.
To go, I got scouts, so I'm going to do this.
A reason not to do it. Yep.
So I think that's probably a point where maybe I thought that I don't think I went into it with that intention, but I think it became that, and I think I should have been a bit more on top of it. Yeah, that's probably what I would click over.
Yeah, cool. Well, it's been absolutely fantastic having you on the Chip Lunch podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
thank you so much to the COVID with Leaves paint and sip picture for joining us as well.
Representing Ethan and Braden.
Yeah, that's right. Some great questions, guys. Thank you so much. Let's wrap up the chips with chicken salt and gravy.
Yep.
And finish it up. Thank you so much. And we always like to, we're going to shake hands. I love it.
I thought that was it. I thought that you were going for a handshake.
I'll shake hands. That's fine. Well, the way we
for context, he had his hand like this in front of his monitor.
I'm like doing it like this. Having said that, we do wrap it up with a one way. So let's do that, and thank you again. One way, guys.